The Numinous Podcast with Carmen Spaniola.
Hi there, and welcome to the Numinous Podcast, where we have interesting conversations with everyday folks about the mystery of life. And every once in a while, I send you a brief missive, a little dispatch from here on the farm on Insilkshin-speaking territory, not too far away from a small town known as Summerland, BC. I'm your host, Carmen Spaniola. I am very excited to share with you about the Past Life Regression session I had last night when I was doing a practice session with one of the students from my Past Life Regression training I'm doing right now. But first, there's like a bunch of context. Right off the hop, I just want you to know that it snowed yesterday, and so I'm walking through snow to get to the horses. I've stood still so I could say this part because I know there are some people with sensory processing issues who really cannot stand the sound of footsteps in snow. So you will want to pause here because I'm about to proceed, and unfortunately you will have to read a transcript, and unfortunately it will be long because this is a long story, I think. Before I get into the story, I just want to tell you the best thing about it snowing here is coyote tracks. So I've been following the coyote tracks right up to the fence, the gate that I have to climb over to get down to the horses. And literally the tracks just stop here. So I'm looking like, where did you go? And you know what? They slithered through. Now I see them on the other side. Those little rascals. I love that part about living here where it snows and we've got coyotes. We saw pack rat tracks, the squirrel tracks. We've had some wolves move in to the valley, kind of far away. But that'll be interesting because there have been neighbors who've seen wolf tracks, and wolves and coyotes don't like to share territory. Obviously, it would be pretty magical to have wolves on the land, but I'm really attached to the coyotes now, and I love it when we see them sometimes, so I hope they don't go away. There's also a cougar in the area. Anyway, when there's fresh snow, it's a lot easier to see how they are living so close and amongst us. These were, I first picked up this coyote trail about 40 feet from our place. From our front door. Yeah, so they're coming close even when we don't know. We hear them yipping and howling and stuff, sometimes very close, and it startles us because we're like, holy crap, that's right there. But very often it's sort of, we live in this steep valley, and so we can kind of get a general sense of where they are, and they're usually kind of up on a hilltop somewhere, and it kind of rings throughout the valley. It's hard to locate them, but when it snows, we see exactly where they've been. Okay. Let me tell you this story. Well, let me climb over the fence first. Hang on. Okay, as I said, this is going to be a longer and more rambling episode. It's so funny that I started these dispatches being like, yeah, they'll be 15 or 20 minutes, just like random thoughts. But I don't have 15-minute long thoughts, friends. I have multi-day thoughts, and I have lots of tracks in my mind that I feel are important for the context, so bear with me. Okay, I had a past life regression session because this is the level 2 of my trancework practitioner mini certificate. So there's a small cohort, 8 people in this cohort, and we're just all the people who kind of nerd out on this stuff. And so you may not know this about me, but before I was a clinical hypnotherapist, this is what I trained in, was past life regression as a therapeutic modality, like a standalone, which I actually don't recommend. and I ended up going on to become a clinical hypnotherapist because there were so many things that was like, this really, I don't know if I should have had this as a standalone. Okay, before I continue on, I just have to tell you, I'm still following the coyote trail. Looks like there's 2 coyotes. But the thing about coyotes is, like, I'm not a great tracker at all, though I learned some cool stuff from So and Pinar of Queer Nature. Been in a couple of talks with them. So one of the things I know is, like, coyotes like to use each other's trail. So you kind of have to, like, stop and look closely to see how many coyotes actually are there. I think there might be a couple here. Anyway, they're running on top of each other's tracks, though. It's very cool. Still following. Where do they go? Oh, yeah. Okay, there. This is not interesting for you because you can't see, but it's really cool to see that the same desire lines in the land that the deer have created, the game trails, that's where the horses go, that's where my dog goes, that's where the coyotes go. Like, animals love to hug the edge of a track or a trail or a road, or like they like the liminal spaces between the ecosystems, and they like to hug the part that's going to give them the most visual protection. Okay, I have to just checking on the water for the horses. We have this horse trough that's solarized so that it doesn't freeze as easily as the other things, the other troughs. But it means I have to break the ice for the horses to get in because it's kind of up higher, and it's just harder for them to reach. They can't kick into it. So bear with the noise here. I'll edit it out maybe. That's not so bad. No editing for me. No editing for you. Okay, so this is part of the training. And you might be wondering, do we really believe in past lives? Like, this may be a step too far. I'm with you. I don't know. Let me just cut to the chase. I don't know. We don't know. I don't think you have to know for this to be an effective therapeutic modality. Now that I have done so much trauma training in the resolution of the symptoms of trauma, particularly somatic and emotional symptoms, I recognize past life regression is actually a very, can be a great modality for folks, certain folks, because it's arm's length and it could be somewhat imaginal. And when done well, it can be a little bit like exposure therapy for people who have pretty severe traumas. And, so we use it pretty often for symptoms like phobias, compulsions, chronic pain or illness, anxiety, depression, all that kind of stuff. Anyway, when I first trained in past life regression, it was under Dr. Johnny Gray. Dr. Johnny is a transpersonal psychologist, and she kind of just stopped doing regular psychotherapy and was doing a lot of trance work, and specifically looking for perhaps potentially the roots of issues in past lives. And so when I first trained with Johnny, when I first went to her as a client was like 2007. And this wasn't that long after having seen on Oprah in 1994 as a young person. I was recently graduated high school, and I saw Carol Bowman, who was a woman whose 2 kids had spontaneous past life memory, and they were on Oprah. Carol Bowman went on to become a counselor herself and write some books on children's past lives. But man, when I tell you I was riveted by that episode, it's still so memorable, those 2 kids. And anyway, so that was kind of on my mind for a long time. And then when my child was like 3 years old, we were playing, and it was like we were pretending to have a little tea party. And so it was like really quite cute, very Victorian looking silverware tea set. And I was playing with my kid V, who was a very early speaker, was very precocious, could speak like in full sentences, pretty young. A potential sign of autism, by the way, for folks who don't know that. Everybody just kind of writes it off as gifted, but keep that in your back pocket. Anyway, we're playing make-believe with the tea. We're having a little tea party. And V looks at me with her little 3-year-old face and goes, "Oh, Mommy, this is just like when I was your grandma and you used to come visit me and have tea." I had this very physical response, I blanched. It really hit me in the gut. It's very difficult to explain how kind of like shocked and hollowed out I felt. There was this resonance of truth in me that kind of creeped me out, actually. And I was like, what do you mean? And they go, "Yeah, you used to come on the horse and you would come to my house and I would make you tea and you were my granddaughter." And I was like, okay. Anyway, we didn't get much further beyond that. She was like, "Sometimes we'd go in a carriage thing," or no, she said wagon. "Sometimes we'd go in a wagon together, but usually, I was old, so I was just at home. But you would come and visit me and we would have tea." Oh my gosh. It was creepy and precious and all those things mixed up. But there was something about my physical, visceral reaction to it that was almost like my body sensations were more shocking than what my child was saying. So shortly after that, I got in touch with Dr. Johnny. And I had a number of regressions. Hey, buddy. This is Reverie, and he's very shy about being touched. We discovered about him, so for folks who don't know, I have 3 horses, and they were all wild horses who've been domesticated, essentially saved from slaughter by the government or by parties who would send them to the slaughterhouse. Hey, you guys. So this is what happens. Sometimes they get a little skittish and things happen. And sometimes they get very boisterous and they really roughhouse. Hey, Ska. How you doing, bud? And what we discovered about Reverie, who is much less enthusiastic about being like outright petted, is that, so he's only 3 years old, but when he was brought in, he's turning 4. When he was brought in at 3 into the ranch where he was put up for auction, he already had his own herd of mares. So he's the youngest here. No, he's the second youngest, but he's the big boss. Yeah, he's not the youngest. He's the smallest, though. He's like a little fjord horse, wildy mutt. Skaha's the youngest. He's turning 3 this year, but he's the tallest. He's a wildy with some Percheron in him. Percheron, but Palomino. And then Bo here, he's actually the oldest. I guess he'll be like turning 15 this year. He's a buckskin. Good looking. Maybe you could call him a silver buckskin. He's got some blonde in his mane and tail. Very handsome. Suits the name. Oh, Bo, you look like you have blood on you. What? What happened to you? Whose blood is this? Okay, we have to check and make sure nobody's injured. Somebody must be injured. Or maybe you had an attack? What happened here? Who's hurt? Okay, I don't see blood on anyone except some on Bo's coat at his chest. Okay, now I'm looking for tracks. Bo, this is a mystery. Is this your blood? I don't see any laceration. If only you guys could speak, hey? Okay, well, everybody's fine, everybody's healthy, everybody's being boisterous. Nobody looks in pain. So, we carry on. Okay, so I had a personal fascination, but I still didn't really know if I believed that past lives are real. But if you start to research, it doesn't take long to come across Dr. Ian Stevenson. He was Canadian American. He was an academic at like University of Virginia or something. And they had a psychological institute that also kind of did like some paranormal type stuff. And like past lives came under it. And Ian Stevenson is famous for having meticulously recorded the reports by children in various countries of the world, collectivist cultures like India, Turkey, Malaysia. And he took meticulous records of these children who had spontaneous past life recollections. And he documented like 3,000 of them to try to come up with like some kind of understanding of like why this happens and if it's just like a mass psychosis. Is it a mass hallucination or delusion? Is it more cultural than psychological? That kind of thing. I've actually got 2 of his pretty encyclopedic books. They're like hardcover with like the plastic protectors and everything. I found them in a secondhand bookshop. And it's an entire book, like 350 pages just of his studies in Turkey. And then the other book that I have, it's like a 6-volume set. The other one is just of his studies in Lebanon. Fascinating stuff where he talks about what different cultures and subcultures and religious sects believe about reincarnation. So, there's data that these are 3,000 verified cases. I should clarify that. It wasn't just 3,000 children. He documented and verified the past lives, the villages where they claim to have lived, the people who they claim to have been, their wife or mother in a previous life, that kind of thing. And after he died, his colleague, Jim Tucker, took over his research. And Jim Tucker, I think Ian Stevenson died in like the 2000s, and Ian Tucker took over his work. And he was the one who realized that the big thing that he contributed is recognizing that actually most children's memories of past lives tend to fade by the age of 3. After that, they're kind of going on the stories of their stories, Ooh, eagle. Eagle just took off from the tree there. Very cool. Okay. So, why am I telling you this? I have had some physical symptoms that I thought were worth exploring because, again, that's like one of the things that people might want to do if you have some chronic condition and it is resisting treatment or, something keeps relapsing. Then sometimes the therapeutic modality that can be helpful is like, is there a root either in some other life or deeper in your psyche that it's too difficult to encounter it as a present life memory? So again, whether they exist or not, I'm pretty agnostic, even though in my personal experience, I have very visceral experiences in my past life regressions and memory comes very easy to me. That's still not really proof. Anecdotal evidence is still evidence, but it's not proof. Okay, so maybe I'll share just a little bit about why autoimmunity was something I wanted to explore in regression. Before I get into like my story in some detail, in case you didn't see it in the show notes, content warning, trigger warning here. We're talking about past lives and regression work. So there is going to be mention of death, talking about moving through death scenes. It's going to be non-detailed mentions of death, non-detailed mentions of sexual assault and rape and patriarchy. So those are all of my content notes. This isn't an episode to listen to with like your kids around. Okay, it's yeah. Okay. So if you have some symptoms, very often, as I said, like anxieties, phobias, compulsions, any kind of repetition compulsion, or like repeated storylines that you're like, man, I feel like I'm trapped in a karmic loop. That would be a good reason to, if you've tried everything else, or you've got some other psychological support, you've done some of that work and it's persistent, then I would go to Past Life Regression. And chronic pain or other chronic health issues, infertility, that kind of stuff, it can be very insightful. And the whole point is that we get unstuck, we get uncoupled from a trauma. Again, whether that trauma really is rooted in a past life or if it's just so deeply embedded in the psyche and so painful you can't approach a present life memory, then this can be helpful to gently approach and have a definitive disidentification with that memory. Because that's kind of the basic structure of past life regression. You find a life that you identify with that has some of the same characteristics and emotional tone and tenor of whatever your current troubling issue is. You identify a life that you're very identified with similar symptoms or similar psychology. Then you disidentify with it. And we do that by moving through a death scene. That's a critical component that makes it different from just other kinds of trance work. In past life regression, as a therapeutic intervention, it is critical that you move people through a death scene, even though you're still doing it very trauma sensitively, and you're still doing it in a very psychologically contained kind of way. That's the critical piece, is to disidentify and have an experience of and then that ended. Whatever that suffering was, whatever that torment was, whatever that anguish was, it ended. And then you process it in life between lives. You process it in an afterlife kind of state. And very often people just have a felt sense, a very strong, again, visceral felt sense of understanding or integration or being able to make meaningful sense of what happened to them in that life and in this life. Now, all of this, again, it does take a sensitive, experienced, astute practitioner. And so, I would make sure you have other things you've done with a practitioner before you go right into past life regression. This is my opinion. There could be some people who use it as a single modality, but I think that they should have training in other forms of psychological intervention or trauma recovery work. So I was interested in autoimmunity because I have 2 autoimmune disorders. One is of the skin and one is of my eye. The one with my eye got quite acute this year. And so now I'm on immunosuppressant drugs for a couple of years. It's in 50 to 70% of the cases, people lose vision in the eye. And so mine had gone on for, I guess, quite a while. And so my ophthalmologist was like, I think you just have a very high pain tolerance, but it's stubborn. It's not going away easily. We need this pretty intensive course of immunosuppressant drugs because it is so bad and has been going on so long. And it became visible to others. It looked like my eye was swollen, probably in the spring, but the redness on my actual sclera, like right on the eyeball, was more visible in the summer. And he's like, no, this has been around months. So it had been around probably since last winter. And it felt very painful in my eye. And when I cried, over time, it started to feel like whenever I cried, I was like, no, and I'm like an easy crier. It felt like lava coming through my eye socket. And it also just felt when I would go to sleep at night, I would look at my eye and be like, yeah, it looks like my normally like hooded eyes. This right eye is puffier, but it felt like it was 3 times bigger than it normally is. It felt swollen. But I didn't have a family doctor. The walk-in clinic is like half an hour away. I'd have to wait all day. Anyway, for lots of reasons, I didn't get medical care. And it got really bad. And one of the things that had been happening last winter was Ruben was still in Victoria packing up the last things of our former home while I was here in the Okanagan living in the RV. I was here by myself with my in-laws, and, I don't live in the same house as them, but I would see them, frequently. We live up on their land at the top of the hill, and I would go down and like shovel their walkway, and I would go down and say, I'm going into town and getting groceries. Do you need anything? And I would make dinner for us all on Sunday nights. So I'd go down to their place and I'd make dinner and we'd eat it together. And honestly, if you've listened to previous episodes with Ruben, my husband, where we've talked about, I think it was in like revisiting our Portrait of a Marriage article last year, early 2025, we underestimated how much pre-existing trauma and undiagnosed mental health conditions are here, present with his parents on this land. And there is a extremely vexing patriarchy problem here. And so here I was by myself. And I'm normally pretty vocal about those kinds of things. But when you have that coupled with a really fragile character structure, if somebody gets feedback, no matter how mild, they collapse. They mentally collapse, and that has impacts on their partner. Then it felt like I was trapped, and I could not voice this. Nobody could see. Nobody was here to witness me. And, if you can't express outwards, it goes inwards. And so I was imploding. I was depressed, but furious. I was furious and aggravated and felt powerless and quite controlled by someone else's patriarchal and depressive situation. So I think what happened is I was under extreme stress, and it couldn't go outwards, and it went inwards. So when the doctor finally got my referral, every doctor, every specialist will say, have you experienced any stress lately? And it's like, oh my God, compared to what? It has been a long time of sustained stress for me. That said, the skin issue, if I really think about it, that started, or a version of it, started in my teens. When I was in the 9th grade, I was 14 years old. I was in a new school. I was a scholarship, a bursary kid at a Richie Rich private school. And it had very high academic, sport, and community service demands, leadership expectations. And it had been a boys' school for, 100 years prior to that. And the year before I attended, they had just integrated girls in grades 11 and 12. And the year that I went was the first year that they had girls in grades 8, 9, and 10. And I arrived in the 9th grade. And so that was pretty tough. Even the female teachers there, even the women teachers, were new and integrating with all these old boys school in the like English private school tradition system. So for lots of reasons, it was a pretty new and strange and different and highly stressful atmosphere for a young gal like me to be in. And in my first term, I think it was like just after Thanksgiving, because it was fall and, the trees were turning, the leaves were turning, and, there are those gorgeous West Coast fall days, right, where the leaves are turning, but it's still like quite green, and it's sunshine and sweaters weather. And what happened was, I didn't have any real close friends yet, and I got a lot of attention from boys because boys outnumbered us 10-1. So it was a lot of attention, and that was crazy to navigate for the first while. And one of these boys was like, "Carmen, come for a walk for me. It's so beautiful. Let's go for a walk." And it was like a 50-acre campus that was all forested and trails. The long story short is, he was like, "I have some Coca-Cola," which was like contraband. You could only get it at the like school commissary on weekends. We didn't have like soft drinks. And I was like, "Ooh, awesome. Yes, I would love some." And I took a big swig and I was like, it had alcohol in it. And he laughed and, "Oh, so funny. Yeah, it's got alcohol. Come on, put me under a ton of pressure. Come for a walk. Drink the cola. Yes, it's alcohol. Just have some." And then it turned into like a chugging contest. Anyway, the long story short is, I had alcohol poisoning, and in that recovery, it was discovered that I had been sexually assaulted. And what ended up happening was I got punished along with this boy for drinking alcohol at school. And the punishment in this school, I'm just going to name it Shawnigan Lake School, because fuck those guys. The punishment at that time at that school for infractions of all kinds was called Wilberforce. And Wilberforce, is the irony of this, is he was one of the slavery abolitionists. I think he was like a Quaker even. Anyway, Wilberforce at Shawnigan was actually physical labor. So after school, 6 days a week, you would have either a sport or an activity. 3 days a week, you did your sport. 3 days a week, you did your activity, which could be something creative in the arts, or it could be community service, that kind of thing. So 6 days a week, right after school, you had a quick break, you got changed, and then you left your dorm, and you'd walk across campus to wherever your sport or activity was happening. And everybody would have to sort of crisscross the campus, but go in front of the main doors of the school. If you were punished, everyone would know it. Because if you were on Wilberforce, you would meet one of the senior teachers at the front door, and they would make you do 100 push-ups and then give you a labor assignment. And that labor assignment would be like shoveling dirt or, compost or whatever, weeding in the front of the school grounds, picking up garbage. And so literally you were like a little chain gang of the people who were like bad kids who were in trouble. And so I must have been the first girl that year to have gotten Wilberforce for anything. But also, when I think about it, I would have been one of the first girls ever. I think there was like some girls the year before who got in trouble for smoking. But I mean, it was punishment through humiliation. At the end of your shift of physical labor, it was 3 hours long, you would go back to the front of the school, and by then all of the other kids would have finished their activity or sport, they would have showered, and now they were headed into dinner. And they would walk back to the school. So everyone would see you doing your 100 push-ups, and you had to do them fast, otherwise you would miss dinner, because you would do Wilberforce like right into when dinner had already started. And so you'd run, you get changed, and you'd get in for the last little bit of food. It was fucking over a twist. So I had then, after that, started to develop the worst allergies like anybody could possibly ask for. I'd never had them in my life prior to that. And suddenly I had hay fever and would break out in hives in the middle of winter. It wasn't really hay fever. It just started where basically anytime I would sweat, I would break out in hives. And of course we had to do sports at least 3 days a week, and sometimes 4, because we would have tournaments and stuff on weekends. And so pretty much from the age of 14 until 45, anytime I would sweat. It was especially bad when I was a teenager. But literally I would break out in these huge red blotches, and they'd be so itchy, and I would have to take so many antihistamines and rotate through all the brands. It was just essentially, but I would be telling my doctors in my 30s, I'm allergic to my body. It was bad. And you just had to suffer through it because you couldn't get out of sports for something like that. And I was a good athlete, and, I redeemed myself in my school career eventually, but it was pretty shitty. And, in my 11th grade, I was sexually assaulted by a schoolmate. Again, he was a year older than me. And then I experienced a really violent rape while I was on a trip with someone else that I knew, and I was dating. And that also just sort of speaks to the repetition compulsion of trauma, is that your radar gets a little defective, and the chances of you being re-assaulted, if you've experienced one assault like that, is actually quite high, because your nervous system starts to go into shutdown and freeze. And again, this is why one of the reasons we have a very high pain tolerance. It's like if you are in chronic pain, you kind of, after a while, the signals are kind of dim. And, I say chronic pain physically or emotionally, psychologically. And again, kind of contributes to why I had a more avoidant attachment style. And we could even go before, I had a more avoidant attachment style when I entered that school. And so therefore, my somatic signals of danger were not as strong as somebody who hadn't grown up with sort of constant low-grade threat, right? So having grown up with Drinky Dad, who was giving me alcohol when I was 12, I was like, more eager to prove that I wasn't a wuss, or that I was tough, or that I was life experienced and not like all these, dandy, pretty boys or girls at this school. Anyway, so now kind of makes sense why this skin situation that is an autoimmune condition, it actually didn't just develop this spring. There's been variations of it that have spiked, and it just progressed to become this. And I've done the things like getting allergy shots every week for a year. I've done all the things. So why not explore past lives for this, right? Never done it before. So before you go into a regression trance work session, the practitioner should interview you. So Christy, who is one of the hosts in the Numinous Network, we've been working together for ages. Oh gosh, certainly a decade, probably more than that. Since before the Numinous Network was a thing, I've been working with Christy. She's come from Minnesota to Vancouver Island when I hosted a retreat there. So we've also hugged. I know how tall she is, so very dear to me. And she's very accomplished as a trancework practitioner, somebody who guides people into trance meditations, etc., and has for a long time. So it was like, yeah, for sure, I'll be your partner. And here's a genuine issue I have, and I have high trust with you and, close relationship. I'll tell you whatever you want to know. And, the interview questions are maybe a little, I don't want to say unusual, but not standard for other therapeutic interventions. Like you're asking, do you have lucid dreams or nightmares? Do you have out-of-body experiences? Have you ever had a near-death experience? Any birthmarks? Any deformities at birth? Etc. So, she went through all of that with me. When it came time to do the trance work, she revisited that. And it was like, no, I just want to revisit this autoimmunity stuff. I hadn't told her about my sexual assault history, though she's heard some things. So she leads me into trance. And the point is, students in this program are supposed to be practicing a full induction and not doing more conversational inductions that I would normally do. So like a very traditional, like relax your body and, imagine a comfortable place in nature where you'll be safe and now you're going to go over a bridge, all that stuff. But I'm so experienced going into trance and past life stuff. I'm one of those people that as soon as my brainwave state slows down and I'm like slouching and like the mask on my face goes slack. And she's like, go to a place in nature. I'm like, boom, I'm in the scene. I'm in the memory. And in this memory, I've been running down this like wagon path. And there's trees that I don't recognize, but maybe I've seen them in movies or something. They're like, I think plane trees. They have like round leaves. Anyway, doesn't matter. They're not like birches or aspens from where I live. I think this is the old world. Maybe France. I don't know. England. I don't know. But it doesn't seem North American. And the leaves on them are golden. And I've been running down the path, but I can hear men's voices. I don't know if I hear dogs, but I have that same kind of sense of like, oh my God, I'm being pursued. And so I have ducked off the trail and I'm not too far off the trail and I'm hiding behind a tree and I feel constriction, like I'm like corseted, not fancy, but it's like I'm in tight into this dress. I can't breathe. And I'm so hot, I'm so sweaty. I feel like I'm hyperventilating and I'm stuck and I don't know what to do. If I run through the trees, I think not only they won't necessarily see me at first, but they'll hear me because there's, branches and leaves and they're dried and it'll just make a huge racket. It's making a big noise as I run through the trees. But if I run on the cart path, they'll see me. And so I'm behind this tree. I'm practically hyperventilating. I'm so hot. I'm so sweaty. I'm flush. I'm red. And all I can think of is like, I don't know what to do. And so Christy very deftly kind of orients me there, moves me to the next relevant scene in that lifetime. And the next relevant scene, it takes me a while to figure out what's happening because I just feel catatonic. Like I'm lying there. Anyway, I'm going to fast forward. Essentially, I'm in like a stone prison cell and I'm in a town, like it's bigger than a little village. And I have been so abused. I think I've been sexually abused. And all I can really say to Christy is like, my spirit is so broken. I don't feel like I'm starving to death. I'm not emaciated, though my body is deconditioned, but it feels like only months after the scene running in the woods. But in this scene, months later, in this stone cold room, lying on some stone slab, I'm just catatonic and I'm wishing for death. Again, Christy very deftly moves me through to a few moments before my death. And I am in a public execution. And even though I had been wishing for death prior, I am so bereft. I'm so sad and I'm so alone. And people are watching me, but they're not heckling me or anything. They don't even know me. I'm nobody to them. And I'm just like I'm like 16 or something. The executioner is there, some kind of official, judgy type magistrate person is reading out my name and what I was accused of. My hair's been lopped and I am sobbing. I am so wretched. And this is it's just my whole life has felt like a disaster. And I'm so alone. And then Christy deftly leads me through that scene to taking my dying breath, my, soul leaving the body. And it's so heavy. I've done so many death scenes in trance myself as the client. And usually the lightness and the release is so relieving, right? It's so good. But here I was like, it's so heavy. It's so hard. I can't even do this. And I'm just so forlorn in every kind of way. And so she did a great job of like calling in guide spirits, like an energy to scoop me up and all parts of me relieved and let go of that lifetime. Don't have to look back at the body, just out we go. And then integrate in the afterlife and, receive some healing or some insight or whatever. And the insight, it was just like, wow, that feeling of being trapped in an unfair situation and so alone and like nobody caring was so visceral for me that experiences that echo that emotional note are extremely triggering for me. And it took me right back to the moment of being flushed and red and in a panic attack, but like imploding because I had to be silent because I was like hiding and not wanting to be found. And so it all just kind of comes out through my skin. And I think, my eye is just conceivably just like the overproduction of sclera is like the skin of your eyeball. And so my eye, is just attacking itself and overproducing. And so it's just another evolution of the same symptoms that have erupted every time I've had this sense of being trapped. And that freeze response, the catatonic of like anyone who has survived a sexual assault recognizes what I'm talking about. The just like your spirit leaving your body and being so possum, like playing dead. It's for real. And when it comes up in other situations, one of the things I have to do is remind myself, like, so that was then, this is now. Mostly, as my 50-year-old self, I do know what to do. And mostly I'm not actually trapped. I have a lot of agency and a lot of choices I can make. And most importantly, I am not alone. So even though Ruben was not with me for 3 months or whatever it was, we are together and he has my back and we are a team. And when I ask for protection, he protects me. And when I ask for defense, he defends me. And we share the values that there's no point in us causing the dissolving of either of his parents' mental health in, their last years on earth. And so we hold a lot because we have more capacity to hold it than they do. And I don't know I think they have evaded the time of consequences, but they live in consequences of their own creation. I can't say that they are particularly happy people, so why punish them more? Anyway, it was so helpful for me to connect those dots. And again, even if past lives don't exist, that very instant, visceral, entire cinematic narrative came to me and made sense for my current situation and gave me the insight or the lessons. Like, the integration piece at the end of a past life regression is meant to help you make meaning of your torment, make meaning of your pain. And so it often just does come in like pretty simple, like almost pithy statements of like, that was then, this is now. I mostly do know what to do. Like little things you can say to yourself or remind yourself to keep you coherent in your current life and not time traveling to your past traumas subconsciously. We know that autoimmunity occurs, it could be because of a stressor and certainly because of a trauma. For some people, that trauma could be like the most mild car accident, right? I can't even tell you how many times there's like a little fender bender and then insurance doesn't want to pay for physical therapy for the woman because they think that her symptoms are like the trigger to response ratio is way out of whack. But it's like, yeah, it can be a tiny little thing that creates the cascade of autoimmune response where your immune system starts over responding to stimulus. So we know that like trauma, sexual trauma, even really mild shock trauma, but also we know viruses. So I've probably had COVID once before, like in March 2020, so before there was testing or anything like that. And so did my kid before there was any test for kids. Those kinds of things can exacerbate and be a root cause of autoimmunity, as well as family history. And my aunt has it. It's been undiagnosed in, like my brother maybe has been diagnosed. I don't know, I haven't talked to him in 10 years, but there were signs. When I was getting my allergies when I was 14 and I was getting those, I think I was 15 by the time I was getting shots every year, and I was getting them at the infirmary at Shawnigan. My brother would come with me. My younger brother was 9 years younger. He also had this like proliferation of allergies, and like who knows what caused that for him. Well, we do know the stress of living with Drinky Dad, but lots of other things were happening too, school, etc. So autoimmunity can occur for a lot of different reasons, and there are some treatments that are, medical, depending on what your condition is. But ultimately, every single one of your doctors is going to say you have to low stress. You have to lower your stress. You have to self-regulate. You have to, get a lot of these are central and autonomic nervous system disorders. And so you need to tend your nervous system. And we can. This is one of the things we do in the Numinous Network, right? Is we do therapeutic tremoring, we do, witnessing, we do attachment work, but we also do the spiritual dimension of our challenges and problems. And again, I think that spiritual or psycho-spiritual modalities, when handled in a trauma-sensitive way, can be almost like an exposure therapy or almost like an arm's length way that we can address stuff that's just too deep for us to live in and that we shouldn't live in. Our body is living in this reenactment and this repetition compulsion of feelings of being trapped, powerless, repressed, and tormented. And when we are moving through the world with those exact same conditions happening writ large, like when you live in an oppressive overculture with fascism, racism, rampant misogyny, your symptoms are just really likely to hit a breaking point. So this is something that I did, and I'm so glad. Some people do experience symptom relief. I don't expect that I'm going to be that person. It could happen. I would really like a reprieve, but I would have to say probably the immunosuppressant drugs are the more potent treatment that I'm on right now. But I think in the larger scheme of things, I do hope that this awareness will alert me to the fact that I can't underestimate how triggering patriarchy and feelings of being trapped with no options or very few options, or that there's nothing I can do and I can't give voice, that is extremely triggering for me. And I have to find the environments where I can get witnessing. And to a certain extent, yes, this comes up with my therapist. It's not like I haven't done tons of therapy about this, but we never stop evolving and growing until the day we die. And there's always different angles to look at. Healing is so prismatic, right? And so the conditions of the world are going to impact what is still residual, or what we may want to revisit, or the new growth edge that we're arriving at with healing we've done in the past. So I think it's evident that I'd hit a growth edge and this happened at just the perfect time, which I love. I bet there are people who are like, gosh, I wonder if she's going to do trance work again. And it's like, let me anticipate this. This whole thing wasn't to like sell you a program. I'm just going to offer some anticipatory guidance though, because it's definitely come up even within the Numinous Network. People who didn't get a chance to take my trance work training are like, when are you doing it again? And I don't know, maybe I'll do it this fall. It depends. I also have my facilitation training level 1 that I'll do this fall. So again, it totally depends how much energy I have and what's happening in the world. But that would be the soonest I would be doing another trancework practitioner mini certificate. I don't have a wait list, no. But stay on my newsletter because I don't send very many emails. And when I do, it's because something like this is happening. So if you see a newsletter from me in your inbox, open it, because it's when I'm announcing that there's a new intake to do a cool thing like this. The other thing I'll say is, like, I don't actually run programs outside of the Numinous Network. So even if there isn't a training you want to take right now, if you want to come and kind of grow accustomed to the culture inside the network, the trauma-informed way that we hold online live calls, or if you want to take some of my on-demand courses like Contact Nutrition 101, you will get so much further and so much more out of your learning if you have a basic sense of the like gestalt, right? So joining the network, taking Contact Nutrition 101 to learn the language and the manner of approach that we take in all of our teachings, all of our classes, and then coming to some of the group somatic practices. We do them like 5 or 6 times a week, and they're specifically for people with sensitive nervous systems, so people with chronic illness, with disability, with physical, mental, psychological challenges that mean that you have to be really gentle with your nervous system. So if you have certainly like anxiety or depression, but also autism, ADHD, POTS, MCAS, fibromyalgia, Ehlers-Danlos, SIBO, leaky gut, any of those kinds of things that are dysautonomia or autoimmunity, or an overlapping of physical and mental symptoms, this is a good place for you. We've set it up for you, for us, for people like us, I should say. Anyway, thanks for listening to my story. Well, that's all I have to say about that. Actually, that's not all I have to say about that. I also just want to say, like, what is my fascination with trance work, you might ask? Nobody asked, but maybe if you were wondering, I would like to say the thing about trance work that I find so not just fascinating, but useful, that I believe will be useful, is that trance work is death work. It's death prep. And this, this comes even from the dream yogis of Nepal, right? The monks who train themselves for lucid dreaming. They do that so that they can become conscious at will, so that they can go into sleep and wake up in their dreams at will, so that they can control their consciousness even when their body has slowed right down. And they do that so that they can be conscious at the moment of their death. They want to be able to be present in the bardo state when, the scenes of their past, of this life are flashing by them. And so they do this lucid dreaming work. And I see past life regression. Well, trance work first, let me say. I see trance work as part of that work. If you can slow down the responses of your body and calm your mind and body and be present, even as you have the unknown presented to you in trance work, and just like try not to control things and just be present to whatever arrives and be able to, keep yourself safe and shift your consciousness at will. It's like another way of describing magical practice, right? That's witchcraft. That's magic. That is all preparing you for the moment in your life where you may be feeling terrified or alone, or you may just be feeling this overwhelming sense of like wonder, nervousness, excitement. When my grade 10 English teacher, Peter Yates, was dying, this was only like 10 years ago, we still had kept in contact, and I got to visit him in the hospital. And he said, my wife and my daughters are obviously pretty distressed. I'll be going home tomorrow. It'll be my dying time. And I said, I don't know how to say this. This is like a little awkward maybe, but I kind of envy the fact that soon you're going to know what happens on the other side. And, he'd been a lifelong meditation practitioner, and he said, don't tell my wife or daughters, but I'm kind of excited, And I think it's from like Harry Potter. It's nothing fancy, but he said, there's a quote that says, to the well-prepared mind, death is just another adventure. So, fuck J.K. Rowling, but that was a good line if she wrote it. And so, you can do past life regression and move through the death scene, and I think that is like very clearly, directly preparation for death. I think it's a good thing to do lots of times. You could also do it through yogic dream work, but I mean, that's a lot of discipline. You need a good teacher and a community of support and care and practice that's all doing it, I think. But you could also just learn trance work. You could learn to become comfortable with the unknown and not controlling every single situation, just being open to what arrives when you release the need to control and you release the need to know and you just go on the adventure. Anyway, okay, that's all I have to say about that. Okay, that's not all I have to say about that. I want to say I'm thinking now about all the women who were once girls, who were once young women, who were once grown-ass women who were violated in the ways that I described. And I know I'm with you. But I just want you to hear how tender I feel when I think about you, when I think about us. It's such a heartache. And fuck those guys. And in this moment, I don't fucking care about, I don't even believe in the male loneliness epidemic. I believe patriarchy, as Bell Hooks said, the first kind of victim is the men, because they have to be so broken and distorted and contorted, and their souls have to be so deformed to become agents of patriarchy. And it's just, that part is a horror, and I feel badly for them, but mostly what I feel is repulsed. I just feel repulsion and anger. But I don't feel powerless anymore. I really don't. Having decentered men quite thoroughly, it's been a bit of a shock to my system to now live within a system of patriarchy here with a man of a different generation. And I'm finding my way to deal with that without it becoming, without it creating consequences for his wife, right? But I think about us, and I think about us as young girls and women, and I think about how many lives have been fucking squandered. These women whose lives are taken up by like now middle-aged men who are just sucking life force out of them. My clients who are women, so many of them, their problems are because their fucking loser partners are sucking life force out of them and have for years. And I know it's not just men. I know this comes up in lesbian relationships and relationships of that are like gender queer mixes. I get it. But the mask, the person coded or shaped by masculinity and patriarchy is like a succubus, man. The women I know who are exhausted, it's just astonishing. And the self-actualization, the creative works, the culture building, the world building that we don't get to experience because of patriarchy is just astonishing. I was like pretty low about it last fall and really needed my sabbatical because I was depleted by men, because I was depleted supporting people who are depleted because of men. So, decenter men. Don't listen to them, like ever, but certainly not their podcast. Don't buy their books. Whatever any man has said, a woman has said it already. Find her, listen to her. Even if she's dead, buy her books, listen to her audio. Do the research. She's out there. Don't vote for them. Don't work for them if you can avoid it. Don't give them your time, your money. Don't give them your attention. And the ones who still pursue, who think you're so awesome when you ignore them, those are the good ones. And they do exist. I've got one of those. They do exist. The ones who like worship you, knowing that you would not give most men the time of day, those are the ones that are teachable and coachable. Okay, I'm starting to go off on tangents. This is all I have to say about this for now.